June 12, 1943, Lyon, France. The puppet theater on Rue de la République stands dark except for a single kerosene lamp illuminating a small wooden stage. 62 people crowd into the basement space, sitting on the floor, standing against walls, packed so tightly that body heat makes the air thick and suffocating. They've come to see a performance of Guignol, the traditional French puppet show beloved by children for 2 centuries. The puppeteer, Marcel Beaumont, arranges his marionettes behind a worn velvet curtain. His hands, gnarled and spotted with age at 58 years old, move with practiced precision, checking strings, adjusting the tiny wooden joints. The main character, Guignol himself, wears a black tricorn hat and carries a stick. Beside him hangs Gestapo, the drunkard, and Madelon, the pretty maiden. Simple folk characters performing simple folk stories. Comic violence, mistaken identities, happy endings, entertainment for children in occupied France where entertainment is scarce and happiness even scarcer. But the audience tonight contains no children. These are adults, workers from the textile mills, shopkeepers, a school teacher, 2 elderly women who could be grandmothers, and scattered among them, invisible to casual observation, 7 members of the French resistance who've come to receive orders for operations across occupied territory. They don't know each other. They sit separately, maintain no eye contact, betray no connection. They're here to watch puppets. That's all anyone watching would see. Marcel begins the performance. Guignol's voice, high-pitched and nasal, complains about the weather. Nafron stumbles onto stage drunk, slurring his words. The audience laughs. It's a standard opening, familiar to anyone who's seen these shows before. But 3 minutes into the performance, something changes. The shadow cast by Guignol's stick against the rear curtain forms a shape that isn't quite random. The angle suggests something specific, something geometric. Madelon enters from stage left, her shadow crossing Guignol's at a precise angle. For exactly 2 seconds, the overlapping shadows create a shape that looks like the letter R. Marie Durand, sitting in the 3rd row, watches the shadows more carefully than the puppets. She's a courier for the Combat Resistance Network, and she knows what to look for. The shadows are the message. The puppets are just decoration. Over the next 40 minutes, Marcel Beaumont is going to transmit detailed operational orders to 7 different resistance members using shadow patterns created by puppet positions, movements, and lighting angles. The Germans have no idea this is happening. They've attended these puppet shows as entertainment. Their censorship officials approved the performances as harmless cultural activity suitable for civilian morale. What the Germans don't know, what they cannot possibly suspect as they watch simple folk puppets act out comic routines, is that Marcel Beaumont spent 30 years before the war as a master shadow artist performing in Paris theaters. He understands light geometry, shadow projection, visual encoding better than any cryptographer. He can create shapes, letters, numbers, diagrams, using nothing but puppet positions and careful lighting. And he's about to pass orders for a coordinated sabotage operation involving railway lines, power stations, and ammunition depots across 6 cities in occupied France. The performance continues. Guignol hits Nafron with his stick. The audience laughs. On the rear curtain, the shadows spell out grid coordinates. Marcel Beaumont is perhaps the most dangerous man the Germans aren't watching, and his weapon is wooden puppets and kerosene light. Understanding Marcel's system requires understanding shadow theater, an art form dating back thousands of years to China, Java, Turkey. The principle is simple. Place an object between a light source and a screen. The object blocks light, creating a dark silhouette. Change the object's position, and the shadow changes. Shadow theater masters could create elaborate stories using flat, cut-out figures and single light sources. But Marcel practices something more sophisticated. He uses three-dimensional marionettes, multiple light sources, and precisely calculated angles to create shadow patterns that encode information. The technique emerged from his years performing in Parisian cabarets from 1920 through 1939. He developed a shadow act that could create illusions, making puppets seem to transform, merge, multiply through careful shadow manipulation. Critics called it magical. Other performers studied his techniques but couldn't replicate them. Marcel understood geometry, optics, angles, in ways that seemed instinctive. The mathematics are actually quite precise. A puppet's shadow is determined by its distance from the light source, its distance from the projection surface, and the angle between light, object, and surface. Change any variable, and the shadow transforms. Marcel maps this three-dimensionally in his mind. He knows that placing Guignol 30 centimeters from the lamp and 60 centimeters from the curtain creates a shadow twice the puppet's size. Move Guignol 5 centimeters left, and the shadow shifts 8 centimeters. Tilt the puppet forward 15 degrees, and the shadow elongates by 40%. He can calculate these transformations instantly, intuitively, the way musicians hear chord progressions. Before the war, this was entertainment. During the occupation, it becomes communication. The transformation begins in November 1942. Marcel is living in Lyon, performing occasional puppet shows for children, barely surviving on what little money audiences can afford. The city is under Vichy control, technically unoccupied but thoroughly infiltrated by German security services. The Gestapo maintains offices on Avenue Berthelot. Collaborationist police monitor public gatherings. Speaking openly about resistance means arrest, torture, execution. Henri Freinet, leader of the Combat Resistance Network, faces a communications crisis. His organization has 3,000 members across southern France. Coordinating operations requires passing orders, but every conventional method is compromised. Couriers are arrested at checkpoints. Dead drops are discovered. Radio transmissions are detected by German direction-finding equipment. The Gestapo's Lyon office under Klaus Barbie, the butcher of Lyon, has become terrifyingly effective at breaking resistance networks. Freinet needs a communication method that's invisible, even when observed directly, something the Germans can watch without understanding. He discusses the problem with his deputy, Claude Bourdet, in a safe house on Rue de l'Hôtel de Ville. "We need to pass orders in public," Freinet says. "Under German observation, impossible. Any public meeting draws surveillance. Not if the meeting has innocent explanation. Entertainment. Public performances. Bourdet considers this. Theater performances are monitored. Germans attend. Censors review scripts. How do you pass orders when Germans are watching the same show as our people? You hide the orders in something Germans see, but don't understand." They recruit Marcel Beaumont through a mutual contact in December 1942. The approach is careful. Marcel has no known resistance connections, but his nephew died fighting Germans in 1940, and everyone knows Marcel hates the occupation. The recruiter, a school teacher named Paul Mercier, attends one of Marcel's puppet shows, then approaches afterward. "Monsieur Beaumont, I enjoyed the performance. The shadows were particularly expressive." Marcel is immediately cautious. "Thank you. I've worked with shadows for many years." "I wonder," Mercier says carefully, "could shadows express more than emotions? Could they express information?" Marcel studies him for a long moment. "That's a dangerous question. These are dangerous times. What exactly are you asking?" "Whether a puppet show could contain a second performance, one visible to some observers but not others." Marcel invites him to the workshop behind the theater. The space is cluttered with puppets, stages, lighting equipment. Marcel lights a lamp and picks up Guignol. "Watch the shadow," he says, positioning the puppet. "What do you see?" "A puppet's shadow." Marcel adjusts the angle slightly. Now, still a shadow. Marcel rotates the puppet 15 degrees. Now, Mercier leans forward. The shadow's shape has changed. It looks like a letter? The letter C. Marcel shifts the puppet again. The shadow becomes an L, then an A. I can spell words using shadow shapes, Marcel says. Numbers, diagrams, maps. Anything that can be visually represented, I can encode in shadows during a performance. The audience sees puppets acting out stories. Trained observers see information. Mercier is stunned. How long have you been able to do this? 30 years, though never for this purpose. Can the Germans detect it? Only if they know what to look for. The shadows appear to be natural consequences of puppet movement. There's no obvious code, no clear pattern. You'd need to know the encoding system to extract the information. This could change everything, Mercier says. We could pass orders to multiple people simultaneously in a public setting. The Germans could attend the same performance and see nothing suspicious. Yes, Marcel says, but I'd need to know exactly what information to encode and who's receiving it. Can your organization provide that? We can. Will you do this? Will you help us? Marcel thinks of his nephew, killed at age 22 during the fighting in 1940. He thinks of France occupied, divided, brutalized. He thinks of his art, his life's work with puppets and shadows, and realizes it could serve a purpose he never imagined. Yes, he says, teach me what you need transmitted. I'll teach you how to read the shadows. The training takes 3 weeks. Marcel works with combat network leadership to develop a standardized encoding system. The system must be complex enough that Germans can't decode it accidentally, but simple enough that resistance members can learn it quickly. They settle on a geometric alphabet. Each letter corresponds to a specific shadow shape created by puppet position and angle. A is a sharp triangle. B is a rounded curve with vertical line. C is a simple arc. Numbers use different shapes. 1 is a straight vertical line. 2 is a horizontal line with upward curve at the right end. 3 is a zigzag pattern. Beyond letters and numbers, Marcel develops symbolic codes. A cross shape means weapons. A circle means meeting location. A square means timing. Complex messages combine these elements. A cross followed by the number 5 and a circle means weapons delivery at location 5. Trainees practice reading shadows during mock performances. Initially, it's difficult. The shadows appear and disappear quickly, lasting only seconds as puppets move. But with practice, observers learn to catch the patterns, holding them in memory long enough to write them down after the performance ends. By January 19, 1943, Marcel is ready for his first operational transmission. The message is simple: a meeting location change for cell leaders in Lyon. Instead of meeting at the original location, a bookshop on Rue de la Barre, they're to meet at a new safe house on Rue des Remparts. Marcel encodes this as a sequence of shadow letters spelling out the new address, followed by a time symbol and the number indicating 8 o'clock. The performance occurs in his basement theater. 40 people attend, including 3 resistance cell leaders who've been briefed on the shadow code. The Germans pay no attention. It's a puppet show, entertainment for workers, harmless. Marcel performs a standard Guignol story about Guignol trying to buy wine from a dishonest merchant. Comic business, stick fights, exaggerated voices. The audience laughs. Meanwhile, the shadows spell out REMPARTS. The 3 cell leaders watch carefully, memorizing the letters. The number 8 appears as Guignol raises his stick in a specific angle. The meeting symbol, a circle, forms when Madelon's shadow intersects with Ganafron's. After the performance, the 3 cell leaders leave separately, never acknowledging each other. That night, at 8 o'clock, they arrive at the new safe house on Rue des Remparts. The meeting proceeds without incident. The method works. Henri Freinet receives the confirmation with quiet satisfaction. This changes everything, he tells Bourdet. We can coordinate complex operations using public performances. The Germans will never suspect. Over the following months, Marcel's shadow performances become regular events in Lyon's resistance calendar. He performs twice weekly, Wednesday and Saturday evenings. Attendance grows. People genuinely enjoy the puppet shows, making them perfect cover. Germans occasionally attend, finding them charmingly French, proof that life continues normally under occupation. They have no idea that each performance transmits operational orders to multiple resistance cells simultaneously. By April 1943, Marcel has transmitted locations for 17 weapons caches, timing for 9 sabotage operations, and identification codes for 23 agents. The Germans capture none of this intelligence. Klaus Barbie's Gestapo office is brutally effective at breaking captured resistance members through torture. But they can't break what they don't know exists. Nobody interrogated about communication methods mentions puppet shows because the security compartmentalization is perfect. Only cell leaders trained in shadow reading attend the performances, and they're told never to discuss the method even under torture. Just refuse to explain how they receive orders. The system's elegance lies in its visibility. Resistance members don't lurk in shadows or meet secretly in dangerous locations. They attend public entertainment in groups of ordinary citizens. If Germans stop them afterward and ask why they attended, the answer is simple: to see a puppet show. No secret documents, no coded messages, no suspicious behavior. The information exists only in memory, transcribed after attendees return home safely. Marcel refines his techniques constantly. He introduces color filters over his lamps, using red and blue light to create different shadow qualities that encode additional information layers. Red shadows indicate urgent priority. Blue shadows indicate background intelligence. He develops a numeric grid system for map coordinates, encoding entire locations in sequences of shadow angles. He can transmit a complete sabotage target, including building layout and guard positions, in a 12-minute performance segment. The breakthrough comes in May 1943, when Henri Freinet needs to coordinate a massive operation across multiple cities simultaneously. The target is the French railway system. London has ordered systematic sabotage to disrupt German logistics before anticipated Allied operations. Combat network must strike railway facilities in Lyon, Saint-Étienne, Rouen, Villefranche, Vienne, and Bourg simultaneously on June 15th. Each location requires specific orders: which tracks to damage, which switches to sabotage, timing down to the hour. Conventional communication methods can't handle this complexity. Sending couriers to 6 cities risks interception. Radio transmission risks detection. But Marcel's shadow system can reach everyone at once. Freinet arranges for cell leaders from all 6 cities to attend a special performance in Lyon on June 10th. The cover story is a regional puppet festival, plausible and innocent. 73 people attend, including 18 resistance cell leaders who understand shadow code. Marcel spends 4 days choreographing the performance. It's the most complex shadow transmission he's ever attempted. He must encode 6 different locations, specific targets at each location, synchronized timing, abort codes in case of German discovery, and recognition signals for local coordination. The information density is enormous. He structures the performance as an extended story. Guignol's journey across the countryside, visiting 6 villages. Each village represents a target city. The events in each village encode the specific operations. In the first village, Guignol encounters a farmer with a broken plow. The farmer's shadow forms the letter L, Lion. The plow's shadow creates a railway track shape. Guignol attempts to fix the plow at a specific angle that encodes grid coordinates for Lyon's marshalling yards. The number of hammer blows Guignol strikes, 7, indicates the number of switches to sabotage. The second village introduces a baker whose oven, shown in shadow, matches the layout of Saint Etienne's railway depot. The shadow positions encode which buildings to target. The performance runs 90 minutes, twice normal length. The audience is captivated. It's genuinely entertaining puppet theater with clever dialogue and physical comedy. Germans in attendance, 2 Wehrmacht officers and a Gestapo clerk, enjoy it thoroughly. They see nothing suspicious. Meanwhile, the 18 resistance cell leaders frantically memorize shadow sequences. After the show, they disperse, returning to their cities. Over the next 4 days, they prepare their operations based on orders received through puppet shadows. June 15th, 1943, 0300 hours. Coordinated sabotage strikes hit railway facilities across 6 cities simultaneously. In Lyon, 7 track switches at the marshalling yards are damaged using small explosive charges. Trains can't route through the facility for 18 hours. In Saint Etienne, a signal box is set on fire, destroying communications equipment. In Rouen, fuel storage tanks are drained into the river through sabotaged valves. In Villefranche, railway workers on the resistance payroll call in sick simultaneously, preventing scheduled maintenance. In Vienne, track sections are subtly damaged using techniques that create delayed failures. In Bourg, electrical substations lose power through cut cables. The operations succeed completely. German railway logistics across the region collapse for 3 days. Critical military transport is delayed by cumulative 72 hours. Wehrmacht logistics officers are baffled by the coordination. How did resistance cells in 6 cities strike simultaneously without detectable communication? Gestapo investigations find nothing. No intercepted messages, no suspicious radio traffic, no courier movements. The resistance seems to have coordinated through telepathy. Klaus Barbie, increasingly frustrated, intensifies surveillance on known resistance meeting locations, cafes, churches, union halls. He doesn't increase surveillance on puppet theaters because why would he? They're entertainment for workers and children. His agents do attend Marcel's next performance on June 19th, watching carefully for any suspicious behavior. They see a puppet show. The audience laughs at appropriate moments. People leave afterward discussing favorite scenes. Nothing unusual. The agents report back that the puppet theater shows no signs of resistance activity. Barbie removes it from active surveillance. This is exactly what Marcel needs. Through summer and fall of 1943, his shadow transmissions grow more sophisticated. He encodes supply drop locations for parachuted weapons. He passes descriptions of German officers targeted for assassination. He transmits schedules for railway movements. Information gathered by resistance members working in German logistics offices. Each performance reaches multiple recipients simultaneously, passing more information in 90 minutes than a dozen couriers could carry in a week. The system faces its greatest test in November 1943. The Gestapo arrests Pierre Faure, a combat network cell leader who attended Marcel's performances. Under torture, Faure breaks. He reveals resistance safe houses, weapons caches, names of operatives. The network suffers devastating losses. 23 arrests in 1 week. Henri Frenet himself barely escapes capture, fleeing Lyon to Paris. The combat network is crippled, its leadership scattered, its security compromised. But Faure doesn't reveal the shadow transmission system, not because he's heroic under torture, but because the compartmentalization works. During interrogation, Gestapo officers ask how he received orders. Faure describes dead drops, courier meetings, verbal briefings. These are methods he actually used for routine communications. When asked about unusual communication methods, he has nothing to tell. The shadow performances exist in a separate category in his mind, something so different from normal resistance activity that it doesn't occur to him to mention it even under extreme duress. He thinks of them as entertainment he attended, not as operational briefings. The Gestapo never asks about puppet shows. Why would they? Their interrogation focuses on known communication methods: couriers, dead drops, radio, coded newspaper advertisements. Shadow puppetry doesn't appear in any Gestapo manual on resistance techniques. Marcel's innovation is so unprecedented that Germans lack the conceptual framework to discover it. After the November arrests, Marcel temporarily suspends performances while the network recovers. He destroys all documentation about the encoding system, keeping the methods purely in his memory and the memory of trained observers. If he's arrested, there's no physical evidence connecting him to resistance activity. His theater contains only puppets and lighting equipment, completely innocent. When performances resume in January 1944, attendance is carefully restricted. Only verified, trained resistance members are allowed into encoding performances. Public shows continue for general audiences, purely entertainment, maintaining the theater's innocent reputation. The spring of 1944 brings new urgency. Allied invasion is coming. Everyone knows it, though nobody knows when or where. Resistance networks across France receive orders from London. Prepare for coordinated uprising to support the invasion. Sabotage German communications. Disrupt troop movements. Cut railway lines. Destroy fuel depots. The scope is enormous. Thousands of resistance fighters must coordinate actions across the entire country. Marcel's shadow system becomes crucial for regional coordination. On May 22, 1944, he performs what will become known as the invasion brief. 60 resistance cell leaders from across central France attend, packed into his basement theater. The performance is nominally a special presentation honoring the birthday of Guignol's creator, Laurent Mourguet, a plausible cultural event. Actually, it's a comprehensive operational briefing for D-Day support operations. Marcel has received encoded information from London via radio, then personally transcribed it into shadow sequences. The briefing covers target priorities, timing sequences, abort codes, recognition signals for Allied liaison officers, and crucially, instructions to await specific radio messages before beginning operations. The Allies will broadcast coded phrases over BBC radio to trigger the uprising. Resistance fighters must listen for these phrases, then execute their prepared operations. Marcel encodes all of this in a 2-hour performance, his longest ever. The show tells an elaborate story of Guignol traveling to Paris to seek his fortune, encountering various obstacles and characters. Each scene encodes different operational details. A scene where Guignol crosses a bridge encodes instructions for bridge demolitions. A scene where he hides from police encodes safe house protocols. A scene where he meets a traveling merchant encodes recognition signals. The shadows spell out radio phrases to listen for: Les sanglots longs des violons de l'automne, the long sobs of autumn violins, and others. The cell leaders watch, memorizing frantically. Some take mental notes, fixing shadow sequences in memory through mnemonic techniques. Others have brought small notebooks concealed in pockets, ready to transcribe information after leaving. The performance is exhausting. Marcel's hands ache from manipulating puppets for 2 hours. The multiple lamp setup generates tremendous heat. Sweat soaks through his shirt, but he maintains precision. Every shadow angle exact, every timing sequence perfect. 60 people's lives depend on accurate information transmission. When the performance ends, the audience applauds enthusiastically. To any observer, it was magnificent puppet theater, a technical and artistic triumph. The resistance cell leaders file out, their minds full of operational orders that will activate when the invasion begins. 2 weeks later, on June 6, 1944, Allied forces land in Normandy. The coded phrases broadcast over BBC radio. Resistance networks across France erupt in coordinated action. Railway lines are cut in 600 locations. Telephone cables are severed. German convoys are ambushed. It's chaos for German forces trying to reinforce Normandy. Units that should reach the invasion beaches in days take weeks. Harassed constantly by resistance fighters, executing orders pass through dead drops, radio messages, and puppet shadows in a Lyon basement. Marcel continues performing through the liberation period. As Allied forces advance and German control weakens, his shadow transmissions focus on tactical intelligence. He encodes locations of German strongpoints, positions of retreating units, locations where collaborators are hiding. The information flows to French forces of the interior fighters coordinating with American advance units. Lyon is liberated September 3, 1944. American troops enter the city to celebrations. Marcel stands outside his theater watching Sherman tanks roll past, feeling decades older than his 59 years. He's performed over 200 shadow transmission shows, passed orders to hundreds of resistance fighters, enabled operations across central France. His contribution is enormous, but it's also invisible. No documents record his role. The shadow transmission system remains classified even after liberation because similar techniques might prove useful in future operations. Henri Frenay visits Marcel in October 1944. The combat network leader, now a prominent figure in the provisional government, finds Marcel in his workshop repairing puppets damaged during performances. Henri embraces him. "The things you did, Marcel, the lives you saved." "I did puppet shows," Marcel says modestly. "They were just puppet shows. They were orders that coordinated operations across 6 departments. Without your transmissions, we couldn't have functioned after our conventional communications were compromised. You kept us operating when we should have been broken." Marcel hangs Guignol carefully on a hook. "The shadows did the work. I just moved the puppets." Frenay shakes his head. "Don't diminish it. What you invented, that encoding system, military intelligence services are studying it now. You created something completely new. Will anyone know about it?" Marcel asks. "Not for many years," Frenay admits. "The techniques are classified. Maybe in 50 years, historians will write about the puppeteer who passed orders using shadows." Marcel considers this. "I don't need recognition. I needed to do something when my country was occupied. Puppets and shadows were what I had. It was enough," Frenay says. "It was more than enough." Marcel continues performing puppet shows after the war, returning to pure entertainment. Children come to see Guignol's adventures. Parents bring families to the basement theater on Rue de la République. The shows are simpler now. The shadows just shadows, cast naturally by puppets moving through stories. Nobody in the post-war audiences knows they're watching an artist who weaponized his craft against occupation. Marcel Beaumont dies in 1968 at age 83. His obituary in the Lyon newspaper describes him as a beloved puppeteer who entertained generations of children. No mention of resistance work. The shadow transmission system remains classified in French military archives until 1998, when partial declassification reveals its existence. Even then, details remain restricted. Intelligence services recognize that shadow encoding techniques could still have applications. Modern historians studying French resistance communication methods find Marcel's innovation remarkable. Professor Claire Dubois at the University of Lyon writes in her 2006 study that the shadow transmission system represents perhaps the most innovative communication security method developed during the war. It exploited a weakness in German counterintelligence, their assumption that certain activities, children's entertainment, cultural performances, were inherently innocent. By hiding military intelligence in puppet shows, the resistance communicated in plain sight, under direct enemy observation. The technical sophistication impresses cryptographers. Each shadow performance transmitted information at rates comparable to Morse code radio transmission, but with perfect security. German signals intelligence never detected it because there was nothing electronic to detect. The encoding existed purely in visual patterns, ephemeral shadows that disappeared the moment puppets moved, leaving no physical trace. Even captured resistance members couldn't compromise the system effectively because the information was visual, difficult to describe verbally under interrogation. Marcel's contribution to Allied victory is difficult to quantify precisely, but certainly significant. His transmissions enabled dozens of sabotage operations that delayed German troop movements, disrupted logistics, degraded combat effectiveness. In the critical weeks after D-Day, when German commanders desperately needed to move armor reserves to Normandy, French resistance actions delayed reinforcements substantially. Many of those actions were coordinated through orders passed via Marcel's shadow performances. The puppet theater on Rue de la République still exists. After Marcel's death, other puppeteers continued performing there. In 2003, the Lyon City Council placed a small plaque near the entrance commemorating Marcel Beaumont's resistance work. The plaque text is necessarily vague. Here, Marcel Beaumont performed puppet shows that served France in her darkest hours, 1942 to 1944. Visitors who don't know the history assume it means he entertained people during difficult times, which is true but incomplete. The full story, the shadow encoding system, the operational transmissions, the intelligence passed through puppet positions and light angles, remains known only to historians with security clearances and aging resistance members who attended those performances. Some are still alive in the 2020. Elderly now, in their late 90s, remembering nights in a crowded basement watching puppets dance while shadows spelled out orders that would save lives. They remember Marcel's voice performing Guignol, the laughter of audiences who didn't know they were witnessing military intelligence transmission, the strange doubled experience of watching entertainment that was simultaneously operational briefing. Marie Durand, the courier who attended Marcel's first operational transmission in January 1943, lives in Lyon, still aged 98. She remembers every performance she attended, 27 in total. In interviews, she describes the experience as surreal. You'd watch puppets acting out comic stories while simultaneously reading military orders in the shadows they cast. Your mind had to work on two levels. It was exhausting but also exhilarating. We were sitting next to Germans sometimes, receiving orders right under their noses. Marcel was a genius. He understood that the best hiding place for secrets is in plain sight, disguised as something harmless. The wooden puppets Marcel used during the war survive in a museum collection in Lyon, preserved as cultural artifacts. Guignol with his black hat, Gnafron with his red nose, Madelon in her simple dress. They look innocent, toys for children's entertainment. Their shadows once spelled out death sentences for German officers, coordinates for weapons drops, timing for sabotage that killed soldiers and destroyed equipment. The puppets themselves are meaningless. The shadows they cast, shaped by a master puppeteer's understanding of light and geometry, won battles. Small victories, local disruptions, but accumulated across months and years, they mattered. Marcel Beaumont understood something fundamental about war and resistance. Victory doesn't always require guns and explosives. Sometimes it requires creativity, technical skill, and the courage to use whatever tools you have available. For Marcel, those tools were puppets, light, and 30 years of shadow theater expertise. He turned entertainment into weaponry, children's shows into intelligence transmission, folk art into resistance. The Germans never saw it coming because they were looking for conventional threats, conventional communication methods. They never imagined that the greatest security breach they faced might be an elderly puppeteer creating shadows on a curtain in a basement theater.